What's up YouTube? KS Gun Guy here. Thanks for joining me today as always. If you like what you see here, do be sure to like, subscribe, and share. And there's plenty more content on the way. So I'm excited to show you a very different firearm. And what I mean by that is it's from a manufacturer that I would say is a little bit off the beaten path, so to speak, and certainly not a mainstream manufacturer. I've got for you guys today the Power P11. And we'll be talking about that here in just a moment. But this was actually sent to me by my good buddy Bald and Curious. Now, Bald and Curious has a YouTube channel just like mine. It covers a variety of firearms, reloading, all sorts of things, lots of really good shooting. I've got his link down below. Be sure to check out his channel. He's extremely entertaining and a lot of fun to watch. So check him out, give him some love. So the Power P11, now this is a Slovakian offering, and this is imported by Eagle Imports. And there are a variety of different models out there from Power, and this particular one being the P11. So we're going to talk about a variety of things with this. Of course, the specs and some of the different features, and some very unusual features about this particular firearm. I'll wheel in shooting along the way, and then give kind of an overall summary of the firearm. So let's go ahead and knock those specs out of the way. The overall length is 7 inches. The height is 4.6 inches. The barrel length is 3.3 inches. The width, I'll give you a good look at this. I'll get my hands out of the way here. The width is going to be 1.4 inches. Now the weight unloaded is 22.6 ounces. It does have a magazine capacity of 12+1, and it does come with 2 magazines, and they are all steel. Now you'll notice there's a little bit of a ding or a divot in this. Bald and Curious is in New York, and unfortunately the magazines, they are restricted to 10 rounds, so they have to pin all of their magazines, which is too bad. But if you are not in one of those states, it would be a 12+1 capacity firearm. Now Eagle Imports and Power, they don't report what the slide finish is. They just say it's black, which is not very helpful. I will say that that Bald has definitely carried this, and I can tell a little bit that it's been carried. However, the wear on it is actually very good. So I would say that that I think the finish is reasonably robust, considering at least the model that I've got in front of me. Now, it is a polymer framed firearm, and of course I'll talk about the grip and all that kind of stuff here in just a moment. Another thing you'll notice, it does have a hammer. This is actually a double action, single action firearm, so we'll talk about that functionality and some unusual features of that functionality as well. So let's go ahead and start talking about some of the features of the firearm, and we'll first talk about the grip. Now, the grip does have 3 different textures around it, from the back strap to the side strap and then to the front strap, and I would classify this as barely medium aggressive. It's actually it's fairly smooth, although I will say, considering how it feels in the hand, as well as the base plate on the magazine that kind of hooks in your hand a little bit, you're able to get a full grip on the gun, and it's quite comfortable. The gun did not move around while I shot it at all. So even though it's a pretty light, aggressive texturing on the grip, I think it is perfectly fine for this particular firearm. Now, if it were perhaps a little bit smaller and more of a traditional subcompact, then I would say that I would want something maybe a little bit more aggressive. Now, I say traditional subcompact. I would say this kind of falls somewhere between subcompact and compact, depending on how you look at it. But since you can get a full grip, and I will tell you, even without the magazine, and I've got kind of average large hands, I can still wrap my pinky around the bottom of the grip. It's not completely on it, but it's about halfway there, and that is certainly more than some firearms like maybe a Glock 26 or something like that, where your pinky really does hang off completely. This one maybe not quite so much. So falls again somewhere in the middle there. Now, from a magazine release standpoint, it is fully ambidextrous out of the box. You don't have to do any retooling or anything like that, which is great. And then the slide lock, slide release, whatever you want to call it, again, is ambidextrous out of the box. Now, you'll notice this third button here. This serves several purposes. Now, since it's a double action, single action firearm, it does have a decocker on it, which is fantastic. I really much prefer decockers on double action, single action firearms. However, it's a little bit unusual in that if it's cocked, you can actually carry it with a safety on. So it does a dual purpose there, and not a lot of guns offer that. There are some other ones that do. But it's nice. You can carry this cocked and locked, so every single time you fire the gun, it's in single action, rather having to transition from double action to single action. So really nice feature there. It does have an accessory rail for lights, lasers, grenade launchers, which is also a great add-on, if you will. Now, of course, we'll come back to the trigger here in just a moment, but let's move our way up the slide. Now, you'll notice that the slide does have forward and rear cocking serrations, and they are just fine. There's just enough to grab onto, even though I think this is, to me, it's kind of reminiscent of a CZ. With a lot of the CZs, you've got a little bit more narrow of a strip to grab onto as far as the slide goes, and I think this is kind of like that, but again, it is certainly doable. Now, from a sight perspective, out of the box, you can expect a 3-dot sight. Now, the rear sight that came with this is the actual sight out of the box. Although Bald has blacked out the dots on this, I think he much prefers just a 1 dot in the front. But it's all steel, and you can actually adjust it for windage. The front sight out of the box is a polymer sight, although once again he has changed it out for a steel sight there. So you do have a little bit of aftermarket support for these, although not a lot. Not too many options. If you know of others or other sight options, please be sure to leave a comment down below. Now, one of the really unusual features of this firearm, and one that definitely caught my attention, you'll notice when I start pulling the slide back, do this a couple of times. The action on this is actually a rotating barrel design. So it's not a traditional locking block design that we're used to with firearms like maybe 6-hour P320s, Glock 19s, Walther PPQs, those types of things. It's just a little bit different. Now, I've recorded this video several times, and at first I was really attempting to take this gun apart. I have to say, and this is personal opinion, your mileage may vary there, this gun is not the most pleasant gun to take apart. It kind of takes three hands to do it. And when I'm wrapping my hands, and you guys probably don't know this, but there's actually a camera that's sitting right here, and I wrap my hands around it. And so trying to take this gun apart, pretending like I have 3 hands and wrapping my hands around a camera, it just wasn't working. So unfortunately, I'm not taking it apart, but I will tell you that to take it apart, you do have to pull the slide back, and there are a couple of little tabs on both sides here, and while you're pulling your slide back, you need to pull down on the tabs, and you have to pull the slide all the way back, and fairly hard. You got to put some pressure on it, and then the slide will actually pop up and pop off. And it does have a captured guide rod, so the guide rod is it doesn't leave the gun. However, the spring can come off, and then of course your barrel can as well. So, and then it's basically reversing the process to put it back together again. And there's some other videos out there that can certainly show that. I know Mr. Guns and Gear has one, and actually that's how I learned how to do it, so I could clean this up for Bald before I sent it back. But again, you know, your mileage may vary, but I found it to be a little bit of a chore. Once it was apart, it was fine. It was easy to clean. So that's it from a spec and a feature standpoint. So let's go ahead and take a look at the range and see how this little guy does. Welcome back. I hope you enjoyed that footage at the range. So from a shooting perspective, I found the Grand Power P11 to be actually a lot of fun to shoot, and a part of that I attribute to the trigger, which I'll talk about here in just a moment. I put 250 rounds through it. I didn't video all of it. Sometimes I get a little bit of warm up in before I start filming, just for the sake of argument, and I found, and I was able to capture some of it on film. When I started shooting this, I was shooting high, and I did finally kind of dial it in just a little bit, at least enough to where I was hitting more center where I prefer to hit on the target. And once I kind of figured out how to shoot it and I got a little bit more comfortable with how I needed to hold this, it actually shot extraordinarily well. I mean, it really is a flat shooter. It's got pretty low recoil, and I attribute that to the rotating barrel feature of this. I mean, it really is, it's a good shooter. It definitely is, for a double action, single action for sure. Now, from a trigger perspective, I won't spend entirely too much time on this, and once again, it is unloaded. But from a double action standpoint, it's a very smooth trigger. I mean, there's a little bit of uptake there, and then you get to a very defined wall, of course, so like you would expect on a double action trigger. But then once you do, it really just glides right through, and it's got about a 9-pound pull on it, 8.5, 9 pounds. So it's reasonably light for a double action pull. So once again, we'll do that. Now, from a single action standpoint, of course, your trigger is going to be far more light, as you would expect, and there's just not a lot there. And I will say, it's incredibly smooth. I mean, we're talking right around 4.5 to 5 pounds for this, based upon my measurements. I mean, it really is fantastic. Now, from a reset standpoint, there it is. I'm going to do that again. It's hard to capture this one. So we'll go ahead and pull this, and then we'll get our reset. There it is. Now you'll hear there's almost like a double click in there, and that can be a little bit misleading with this trigger. We'll do this one more time, just one more. There's that first click. I don't know if you heard that. And then there's your reset. Now, once you get this gun going, and again, I didn't notice that first click at the range, but it is definitely there. But by and large, the trigger on this gun for a double action, single action is perfectly acceptable, if not very good. So I was very impressed with how this gun shot, for sure. Now, from a concealability standpoint, I mean, I think realistically it's a very concealable gun. Again, coming in around just under 23 ounces and falling somewhere between a subcompact and a compact firearm, I think it is definitely a very carryable gun, and especially because you can carry it either cocked and locked, which is fantastic, or you can do your double action, single action pull, whichever you prefer. Either way, you've got several options there. And if nothing else, this is kind of an unusual firearm because we don't necessarily see these all the time. And if you go to your local gun store, they might not have any Grand Powers. I know mine, generally speaking, doesn't, unless they get something in used from time to time. But it's been a lot of fun to play around with this. I will say, if you have the opportunity to try out a Grand Power, I would recommend it. I mean, they're good quality guns, and again, a lot of fun to shoot. If you can get past the taking apart part of it, I will say that's the one thing that's a little bit of a hang-up. Although, again, you're not cleaning it every single day, so it's not that big of a deal. And of course, you probably get more used to it as time goes on. But once again, Bald, I really appreciate you sending this to me. This has been a lot of fun and a unique experience for sure. It's a fantastic firearm, and I do recommend it. I'm looking forward to hearing what all of you have to say about this, so be sure to leave some comments. Tell me your experiences with Grand Power, whether it's the P11 or any of their other models, or if you're just curious about this gun and how it stacks up to some other guns that maybe are like it or kind of like it. So also be sure to join 1776 or Bust, Big Johnson Guns and Gear, and myself every Wednesday night. We switch off duties, so be sure to check out all 3 channels, and we get together and do a live stream for about an hour every Wednesday night. Have a lot of fun, talk with all of you guys about various firearms out there, so do be sure to join us for that. Otherwise, again, thanks so much for joining me, and talk to you next time. Thanks!